Greetings. My name is Rebecca, and I am the good wife at the Crone House. I'm very happy to be here to participate in Kelly Bear's 54321 tarot tag. It looked like so much fun. I thought I would give it a try. And coincidentally, this morning when I came onto the computer, first thing I saw that I had been tagged in the tag. So thank you very much, Mary Grace. That was really lovely of you to do so. I'm very flattered, and I enjoyed your video very much. The idea of the tag is there are 5 different categories. The first part we're to name 5 tarot decks or decks, and then 4 books, etc. I will itemize as we go down into the as we progress. I'll show you, and I will put the questions or the tag down in the description box below. But Kelly structured the tag in such a way that it was a little open-ended. We could use our judgment how we wanted to answer it. The first question just says 5 decks. It just asks for 5 decks for you to recommend or name, or it could be your 5 favorite, or your 5 least favorite, or your 5 favorite Halloween decks, or they don't even have to be tarot. They could be Lenormand or Oracle decks or whatever. She left that up to us, which I appreciate that. Thank you, Kelly. She did tarot decks. I'm going to do tarot decks as well because I find tarot. I do read Lenormand. I do read Oracle decks, but tarot is my first choice always. If you have watched me at all before, you probably know that I spent the first probably 35 years of my tarot reading life reading one deck only. I didn't even have an interest in getting other decks. I started reading I think my first deck was dated 1972. It's a hoi polloi. That was the only deck I had for years and years and years and years. I carried it from college, through my marriage, through many moves. But once I discovered other decks, I got real excited because I do like them for different reasons. I'm not a collector like many of you are, but I do like to use different decks for different purposes. And that's what my selection for the 5 decks is about, because we just celebrated Mabon, which was the equinox, when the hours of day and night are equal. From that day forward unto Yule in December, the amount of darkness each day is going to increase. So it's going to get darker, 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 darker. And at that time of the year, I like to switch to darker decks, what I call darker decks. They're decks that can be used anytime, but for me, they're particularly good for purposes in the darker half of the year. I have some that are very springy-like and cheery and light, and I use in the lighter half of the year. Now, during this time of the year, I also have decks that I use for specific purposes. For instance, I have decks I use all through October into the first half of November for communicating with the ancestors and the spirits. I do a lot of work with those. So I have certain decks for that. I have certain decks that I use the month of December, approaching Yule, when working our way up to the light. They read really well for me right now. When everything is so busy, they seem to really be good readers at that time. So I use them then specifically. And then I have several decks that I use in the first part of the calendar year, January, February, in there, when I do the majority of my shadow work. And so I have decks I use specifically for that. I'm not going to name any of those decks today. Today I'm only going to tell you the 5 decks I'm going to use for everyday readings, for daily draws, or for answering specific questions, or for just checking energies around me for certain reasons during this dark half of the year. Let's say dark part of the year, not half. Up until about Imoko and I switch. That's when I about switch. Or maybe a little bit before. A star. I don't really go to a star, but in that period of time, I make the switch. Okay. So I'm going to move my camera. I have another camera. I'm not going to move my camera. I'm going to show you what's here on my table. You can probably see what's on my table, but I'm going to show you a little better vantage of the cards decks that I chose for the 5 tarot decks. 5 tarot decks that I want to work on during this dark part of the year. You can see my first deck here in front of me is the Wild Unknown Tarot, and I know this is not a new deck to any of you. To me, it is relatively new, and the reason being is I usually prefer a deck that has a minor arcana that is very heavily illustrated. I love to see the illustrations. That's one of my favorite ways of reading. But this deck, so usually this is a little pippish. It's a little bit of a pippish deck for me. I don't know if you can consider it a pip deck because it does have illustrations, illustrated minors. Let me get to here. They're rather illustrated. We still have the 3 swords, and they're bound in the 3 of swords here. We have, let's see, here we go. There we have the 5 of swords. You see, we don't have the normal illustration that we see. Here we have the 4 of wands. So you see that it's really pippish. I guess it would be a pip deck. But look at the beautiful, beautiful illustrations. They're just lovely, and they're very compelling. They draw me right in. I saw somebody do a flip through on this deck. Usually I don't watch a lot of flip throughs because I don't, like I said, I'm not a collector. And this one I knew didn't have really illustrated minors that I'm normally used to, but I was so compelled by watching the flip through, I had to get the deck. They're just the symbolism on the cards are just very sensitive. They're very insightful, but very sensitive. I find them just they lift my spirits. They lift my spirits, and even when it's sort of a hard card, there's still some, you can see the positive in them. And I love the use of the animals because I do love animals very much, the connection to the earth. I hope you can see my light is rather primitive in here. I hope it's okay. But I really love the fresh perspective that this deck gives me. Somebody who's been reading a lot of years, I love the freshness that I get from this deck. So this would be my first deck that I wanted to share. And I do not even have a box for it yet, so I'm going to have to, a bag. I'm going to have to make a bag. Okay, the second deck that I'm going to share is a deck that is very new to me. It's quite new to me. Again, it's not that new of a deck, I don't think. But this is called The Raven's Prophecy Tarot. It's by Maggie Stiefvater. And I got this as a gift from my daughter, who was excited. She got me this. She was excited because she knows I like reading. And she got this. Maggie Stiefvater is an author, and she wrote a book. And this deck, then she went and created this deck. And I think the book that I got has reference to tarot in it. I haven't read it yet, so I can't say, but it seems to claim to have some reference to tarot in it. So she was very excited about that. So I got the deck, and I really was excited when I saw, first of all, again, it is really nice deck to shuffle. Whoops, they wouldn't know by that shuffle. My table's a little high for me, so it's a little hard, but I do like to riffle shuffle, and I'm so particular about being able to handle my cards and shuffle them well to get a really good reading, so I was really excited to see that. A lot of people have criticized the cover being black and orange. I think it's very Halloween. Well, black and orange are just 2 colors. We don't want to go crazy. But again, I'm thinking, this is a rather interesting deck, isn't it? The illustrations, again, are I hope there's no glare, are just unique. It's very unique. Very unique. And I'm thinking, oh, I don't know if I like it until I read the guidebook. And once I read the guidebook, I could see, oh, I do very much like these illustrations. And I'm really going to enjoy working with this. It's very similar to the Wild Unknown, that it has this very simple designs. But that helps me get to a different perspective. You know, some things, like my mind is so busy. I have so many things in my mind all the time. And some of these they're lovely to use for meditation. You know, when I really want to sit with the cards and take in the meanings a little bit, which I do a lot of readings that are that way. Just sit and look at them for a while and get a meaning rather than a really quick the really quick 3-card or whatever that we normally do. Okay, so this was really nice. Again, they're beautifully done. Very compelling, very compelling. The artwork is very compelling. So I'm excited to start to work with this. And if you watch my channel, you'll see me. you'll get to see how I thought about it. Okay, now I have the next two coming up are decks that I have never used yet. I have never ever used. So I thought, let's give it a go. And the first one, and I'm not even sure where these decks came from. I believe these decks were gifts. This is called the Tarot of the Elves by Mark McElroy. It looked pretty neat to me. I've had it a while. I just haven't used it because it just, I don't know. I wasn't sure. But I've been thinking, you know, I do a lot of activities here at the Crown House, especially around, you know, Beltane, Star in the spring, particularly with elves and fairies in our yard. We have had some wild experiences in our yard with some of them. So I thought, you know, and I know a lot of the myths and things that go along with that, but I didn't really understand too much, you know, anything that was, you know, based on any kind of actual, I won't say fact, I'll say common myth or whatever. So I thought it would be interesting because this deck, it was explained in the guidebook, it was not meant to be just elven themed, you know, about elves, which there's a lot of decks like that. But this is if the elves might have tarot decks of their own. What might they use? And I really like that kind of a way of looking at it. It's structured like the Smith Waite, but it has a story that goes along with it. Like we have the Fool's Journey in the Smith Waite. In this deck, we have a story born out of elven mythology. So there are characters represented in the deck, and I'm going to sure be doing a video on that too as I experiment. But you can see very well that that's the Magician card. It's just a little different, but there's a story that goes along with it. Okay, so I thought this would be interesting to try. You know, in this dark part of the year, we're inside so much more, and that's a good time to try out new things and try to study some new things that we're not maybe used to, you know, things out of our ordinary methods. Okay, so that was that. And then another deck, the deck after it, following along the same way of thinking. I've had this for quite a while, and I have not used it at all. And this is called the Fairy Wicca Tarot. Okay, and this one, I just put it aside. When I got it, I put it aside because I thought it was going to be confusing for me in the beginning. I didn't want to just get it out and deal with it like you do with any kind of a you know, new deck. Even though, here we go. I sort of was clumsy opening that, wasn't I? They're beautiful. They're decks. The cards, normal cards. It's a nice size. It's a nice size. Let me see if I can shuffle this one. I do use decks that are not easy to shuffle, but that's how I love to see a deck that I can handle in my hands. I think I get a better reading when I can really get a good grip on the cards. This deck really, it does follow the normal 78 of a Smith Waite. It has that kind of it's true to that, but it's a little more specific as they have 5 more cards that are specific only to this deck. So instead of 78 cards, we do have 83 cards. Okay, so in addition to the normal major and minor arcana, we have something called the Power card, and something called which is the Tree of Life, and then there are 4 Gift of Fairy cards in here too. I don't know if I can get to them, find any. Let's see, find any when we go. And I think you can see it has the Irish name on each card, plus the English. But these are here, the Apple Branch. That's one of the extra cards. Okay, that's one of the fairy cards. A little extra. And then we have, I don't know what else we have. Anyway, I thought this again would be interesting to if I'm going to study the elves, I might as well study the fairies. So I thought I would do that. So, and I do have some of my ancestry is Irish. So I thought, well, I'm interested. I think somebody gave me, here we have the Holy Stone. That's another one of the extra. But you see some of them, like here's the 10 of, here, this would be the 10 of Swords in English. Isn't it? Or 10 of Wands. I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure. So anyway, it's kind of interesting. It's very much in tune with the, it has, the core cards are known as helper cards, and the ancient ones, the major arcana, each of the major arcana and the ancient ones has a card from Irish mythology. So that's pretty interesting. And then the minor arcana are called the element cards, which we do, we use elements normally anyway. Some of us do more than others. Oh, there's the hazel wand. So you see, I'm discovering as I'm sharing with you. So I don't really know what to say about it other than I'm very curious, and it's a good time of the year to follow your curiosity. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay. So I'll let you know again if you want to know how it comes out. Check out my channel and you can see how it comes out. Okay, and then finally, my last card. This is more or less to keep me grounded. I don't want everything to be new to me. So I just pulled out one of my favorite normal decks. I use this quite a lot. And this is the Druid Craft. And it's just to really keep me grounded. I usually always have something in the background, and this is one that I have modified because it was big. It was just really big. But I love the imagery in these cards. It reads so easily for me. It has such beautiful coloring. So, I have all the, I was teaching a class, so I have all the core cards near the front, but it's out of order. I have to really shuffle this before I go to use it. But it just says it's the usual uses the usual imagery that it's not so far from the imagery that we're used to seeing. It's just done. It's just done in a way that is read good for my soul. It's one of my decks that I use, good for my soul decks. Like I use the Wildwood too. The interesting thing, it goes along with my own practice. One of the things I like about this deck, there is a quote in the book that goes with this. It says, "The ways of the Wiccan and Druid are quite distinct. Many people follow a path that combines the teachings and practices of both traditions." Very much so, like in the U.S. Like things are, people who sometimes criticize people here in the U.S. for appropriating traditions from cultures that are not our own. I want to remind you that everyone here in the U.S. that lives in the U.S. and for any time that has come from the U.S. has ancestry from somewhere else. None of us are, unless you're just an indigenous native to the country, as an indigenous people are. If you have any other blood in you, it comes from somewhere. And a whole lot of them, very, very commonly, where I'm from, basically, I was originally from the eastern part, the northeastern part of the country. Very heavily Scottish ancestry, Irish ancestry, Polish ancestry, Italian ancestry, German. Those are, everybody has a combination of that somehow in their family. So this is the traditions of this, to some extent, is very much our tradition as well. Okay. Now, my own personal tradition, my husband and I particularly are both witches. Both of us are solitary. We have a solitary practice of our very own that we do with our home, but we also are associated with a coven, a Wiccan coven. And I am a high priestess, and he is a high priest of a Wiccan coven. But that is just for ritual purposes, okay? Other than that, our practice is very much leaned into the ancestry, the craft of the ancestral wisdom and the stories that from where we came from. My husband very, very heavily interested in the Druid stuff, but we both observe very strongly. We both observe the reverence for the earth, the seasonal ceremonies of the wheel of the year, and the elements. A lot of things with the elements. So this deck is something that keeps me very grounded in those things. So I always, whether it's the light half or the dark half of the year, I like to include something that will help me stay grounded in this way. Okay. So that was the first question. Okay. The second question has to do with 4 books. Now, I'm a very big reader, but I don't have a lot of tarot books. If somebody wants me to recommend tarot books, I'm not the person to ask. But I do have a reverence, a very grand respect for some of the guidebooks that come with these decks, and so I thought I would choose 4 of those. We all have, Shadowland Tarot readers have a joke among us about the little white book that comes in with the decks, which, yes, they're pretty laughable in a lot of cases because they just contain a lot of keywords and things. But a lot of publishers and creators of decks are getting very, very smart about the book that accompanies the decks. And some of these books are just treasures on their own without the accompanying deck. And so I thought I would share 4 of those for my books because I admire them a lot. And the first one goes with the first deck that I chose, which is the Tarot Guidebook for the Wild Unknown Tarot. And it is such a beautiful, simple little book. It's so charming. And I don't know if I'm more charmed by the book or am I more charmed by the deck. But there's no keywords at all. Well, there's some keywords here, but they're not that important. I mean, they're just there. But in each one, there's just a simple little paragraph written that describes the energy of the card. It doesn't really give it as a meaning, it gives it as a description. Okay? It's so uncluttered, it's so gently presented, it's so much to the point, and it goes so much to the artwork. Okay, as you can see here, we have the Daughter of Wands. It's just one I have open. It says the Daughter of Wands is a free spirit, a truly visionary creature. She usually waits until later to settle down or start a family, as she's busy with her career. She can be stubborn and much stronger than she looks. As with all the Wands family, the daughter makes a dangerous enemy. This card can also represent a woman going through transformation or spiritual breakthrough. But it's just so nice and gentle, and just so, there are good ways to contemplate the cards. So I really like this. The second book again goes with another deck that I'm going to do, and this is not the book that the woman, I'm not going to recommend her book, work of fiction, because I haven't read it. But here, the Illuminating the Prophecy is what kind of sold me on the deck in the first place. Because just as she is a writer that created a deck, you have to believe that the writer has to have her book has to be, since it's written by a writer, has to be, equally good. And you can see that it is, because it's just, again, she has just a little write-up in here, a few keywords. I don't even look at keywords normally. I think most of us do not. But it's written well. It's easy read. It's a really lovely way to understand. A lot of people buy tarot books that help you to understand, and a lot of them, I think, confuse us more than help us. So if you get a really good accompanying book that accompanies a deck, such as this, that is written well, to the point, it does more to help you with the meaning of the card than anything ever. So I really like this. That's another reason I like the deck, was this book. A third book, this is a deck I use often. This is the Forest of the Enchantment Tarot. I get confused because on the front it says the Enchanted Forest, but this is your path through the Enchanted Forest. But this is actually, the deck is the Forest of Enchantment, which is a deck that's very heavily descriptive of fairy tales. You know, it's the tales and myths, and it has a lot of the cards have to do with fairy tales and characters you meet in the fairy tales, etc., and stories. And it's very lovely, and the book is beautiful as just an accompaniment to the deck. But it also, again, it's like reading a really interesting book. Like, here's the Five of Spells. Five of Spells, and the spells here are the Five of Wands. It's the Five of Wands. And it says here, a few students from the Woodland Wizarding School have come out to work on their transformation spells, and total hilarity ensues. As you can see, they're turning things into toads. Though to us as onlookers is seen as humorous, these toad boys are deadly serious about their mock battle. They are learning their craft, exercising their powers, and refining their skills through camaraderie, competition, etc. And I really like that, because that is really, it gives you a good example in the theme, way it goes with the theme of the book, about the Five of Wands, like what we see normally with the Five of Wands. So it's really very fun. And then, in addition to that, it has, you know, down at the bottom, it has a closer look. And it has, for this card, it has the wizard professors make the students work out their magical errors on their own, which means some young half-toads may have trouble holding their forks at dinner. It's just a little humorous, but it gives you a little bit more insight into the cards, which, again, I love that. It's a different way of looking at the cards. It adds some dimension to the meaning, to our traditional meanings. It doesn't deviate. It still means the same thing, but there's another layer added to our understanding of the card. Okay. Now, my last book that I'm going to recommend is a book that goes with one of my favorite shadow decks, which is the Shadowland Tarot, and I love the deck. I have recommended the deck so many times to so many people. My dog is dreaming under the table. Pardon me. Pardon him. Louie, come down, darling. I think I've recommended this deck so many times, and partially, I can't tell if I recommend it just because the cards are so adorable or the book is so good. Because the cards are really adorable, and the book does show a color version of each card. But what I like about it is it's a very good deck for understanding what shadow work is all about. Because a lot of people, we hear the term all the time about, I'm doing some shadow work. Oh, I'm doing my shadow work. And I had some students one time say to me, what is shadow work? What do you mean by shadow work? They weren't sure. Well, this book has a very good preface that talks about the psychologist Carl Jung, who talks about how this book addresses shadow, how it addresses the shadows, those monsters inside us, those patterns, those things about us that we don't like, or the things that, why does this always happen to me? Why do I repeat mistake after mistake after mistake? This deck is to address that in a way that is adorable. You don't hate those parts of yourselves anymore. You come to love all parts of yourselves, because these monsters in here are so adorable, which represent your shadow side. So it's a really good book. That's a reason in itself to get the deck, is this book. But underneath, what I really love about this guidebook in particular, it has a really good message. It does offer some keywords, but it does have a really good message to increase our understanding of the card. But at the very end, and this is the part I love, at the very end of the description of the card, it has a section called Reflections, which are exactly what it says, questions to reflect on. What thoughts, here we have the Nine of Swords, what thoughts keep me up at night? Can I think about or resolve any of these issues during the day? Do I confront my fears or acknowledge them as they arise? What is my biggest fear? Are there wounds from the past that are lingering? You see, each card has these reflections, which are really very lovely for doing shadow work. So that is the reason that I am recommending the Shadowland Tarot. and especially from the book. It's Monica Bodierski. And by the way, these decks and the decks that go with the books and the decks I have already recommended, I will have links to those in the description box below in case you want to get the decks for yourself and you don't have them. Okay, the third, moving along, don't want to make this too long, but the third section, the beauty of this is that it gets smaller as we go along, so it goes quicker if you think the video is getting too long. But anyway, the 3 spreads that I am recommending. So let me just take a minute and get my cards out here. I had to think a lot about this third question, the 3 spreads, my 3 favorite spreads, I guess. But she didn't say favorite, she just said 3 spreads, so 3 spreads. Because I don't always use spreads. I typically will, like for daily draw, I will typically just put out 3 cards. Sometimes I will assign a question to the cards, but often I just see how they relate to each other. I'm a big fan of the 9 card or the 3x3 card, which a lot of Lenormand people know about, is just putting out 3 rows of 3 and stepping back and looking at all the different ways that the cards relate to each other. I do that a lot, and I teach that in my classes as well. That's something I use a lot. But I thought, no, for this question, I'm going to show you exactly 3 spreads that I really would use. And the first one is just simply, and here I'm using the Crow Tarot, and there's a method to my madness, so I'm using that. So just for right now, this is the Crow Tarot, which is one of my well-used decks. One is just, I will call it a symbol cross, where it is really the part, it's more or less the center, the beginnings of the Celtic cross. It doesn't have the second card, but it does have the center card, and I usually will put it out and go, this would represent the heart of the matter, or this, there we go, the tower. It represents, the issue, here's an issue, or the heart of the matter, or the subject of the reading, everything is revolving around. And then I will say, as above, so below, behind, and in front. Looking at how they relate to this deck, of course, as above, so below is, as above is something that is there. It could be a helper, it could be a guide, it could be some positive thing that you do know about, that is there for you, a resource for you. Here we have the inner strength, actually. If we're looking at the tower, that's kind of, that's very nice, that's helpful. What we don't know about is, here we have the 3 of Cups, the 3 of Cups, and that would be your community. You have other people. It's not just your strength, it's somebody else's. So I really like how they play upon each other. And here I have behind and in front how the past relates to what is yet to come. And we have this I like it a lot because it's almost like a path, a trail that we go from the past to the present to the future if we're going that way. So we have here the 8 of Pentacles in the past, and we have the what do we have? The 5 of Pentacles in the future. 5 of Pentacles if we relate to it this way. So this would give me my read, okay? Now, usually I just do it this way. I don't have anything, another card on the top or anything like that. But also I will take this, almost the same setup as that, for a second spread. This one I do a lot of times, but this one is if it's an elemental cross. And I use the same layout, but in this case, I will take Earth in the north, Earth, air, fire, and water, and then in the center, Spirit. Okay, Earth, air, fire, water, and Spirit. And here I am checking for elemental balance. This is card that I have in my Earth. And here I have, you see I have swords in my Earth. I have air in my Earth. I have air in my Earth, okay? So maybe my ground is not as steady as I thought. We have wind maybe blowing some of the ground, displacing some of the ground. So that's something that might come into the reading, okay? Then I have in the East, Pentacles. I have Pentacles. I have Earth in my air. Earth in my air. And that's kind of interesting. And down here in fire, I have the Hierophant. And in water, I have the Four of Wands. The Four of Wands in water. So I have fire in my water. Fire in my water. So, and then we would have spirit. Spirit. The card represents spirit. Now sometimes, and I've done it, I've even taught a workshop on this. Sometimes I will take a second deck of cards. And in this case, I'm going to take the Murder of Crows Tarot, because the Murder of Crows is one of those shadowy decks that I like so much that I was describing. It is a very dark, kind of a dark deck. I'm using this I use this a lot for shadow work or in the dark part of the year. This is very common. But in this case, I'm going to put a card beside the cards that are already out, so that I can see light and shadow both of the card. So I don't have a lot of room here. Okay, but you can see that, right? You can see that. So here I would have, in the position of Earth, while I do have these swords in the position of Earth in the north, I also have a sword that is leaving. I have a sword that is there's movement going on. The Six of Swords, going on to finding a better, stronger place to land. So this implies if I'm looking how I'm going to be balanced at this time, if that's why I'm asking for this reading, how I can be more balanced, getting my elements in balance. One of the ways to balance my earth energy is movement. Whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm thinking, maybe I have bad thinking or bad communication or something that has to do with the air. I need to take care of that. I need to move away from that to get myself grounded. So this is the way that I would do that. I don't want to go into I don't want to go into a lot of detail. I do have this, I think, on my channel, and I also teach workshops on this and classes on this. So if you're interested in more information, you can ask me. But it's pretty straightforward. Just remember that it's in earth and in air and in fire and water and spirit. Okay. So that is my second. And the reason I got these cards out that I wanted to show you is this is my third spread, and this is one of my very, very favorite spreads of all time, because this is a spread that I use, and I call it a narrative among crows. If you're not familiar with my channel, you might not know that I am very, very, very attached to crows in my neighborhood and in my life. I've had a lot of experience with some crows. I love them, how they attach to me in my birth and my life, my neighborhood, in my personal life, in my spiritual practice. And I have an Urban Crow Oracle, which I use, and I really love this. And I use this in connection with the Crow Tarot, the Murder of Crows Tarot, and this one. And you can use this for any three cards. It doesn't have to, any three decks. It doesn't have to be about crows. Because what I do here is, I use this a lot for my year ahead. And I'll give you an example. I can use it in I could just put out three cards for any time of the year. I could just basically put one of that, and one of this in between. And this is, how are these playing against each other? And here is a key word and the message that comes. There's a guidebook that goes with mine. There's a message that comes. How do these play together? Okay, is what it would be. But what I do, when I do my year ahead spread, and I'm going to be doing one on my channel. I'm going to be doing a video on this coming up for the next year. I do it every year. But I go through my cards. First I use the Crow Tarot, and I go through it, and I pick a card for every month of the year. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, every month. And here I have the sun. This would be my January, okay? And then for February, I would take one of the Murder of Crows. Where did I put it? Murder of Crows right here in front of me. And I would, let me shuffle a little bit so I have something different to show you. And I would pull a card. And that is the Three of Pentacles. Okay, so I have the Sun and the Three of Pentacles. And I would say for the month of January, we have all this brand new start, and it's the beginning, and everything's good, and the sun is out. But at the same time, we have the Three of Pentacles, so we're still They're still working on things, right? We're still going somewhere. And then I will pick one card from here to go with it, and that card will be my keyword. My keyword is insight. And there's a little message, I want to say, there's a little message in the book that goes along with this deck. Okay, so I would just look it up and there'll be a whole page of something to contemplate about this. But this is how these cards would play about it. So for my month of January, in my journal or wherever I want to do it, I would be journaling on these 3 cards. That this is the energies for that month. Okay, how these 2 cards play against each other and how they're connected in this way. Okay, so those are my 3 spreads. Those are my 3 spreads that I would recommend. Okay, now I'm going to come back and show you my face because I like to see you when I'm talking. So I'm going to stop this and come back with my face. The 4th question on the tag has to do with 2 tarot habits or paraphernalia that you put with have to have when you read or something like that. I'm looking at my notes here. I want to make sure I don't forget. I know I have, I do have some rules for my own personal readings, such as I have to read on a cloth or something, and I have things like that. But one of them that is really maybe unique to me is that nobody cuts my cards. I'm not saying nobody can touch my cards. I welcome when I'm doing a reading for somebody to have them touch my cards. I don't have any problem with people touching my cards to look at them, to examine the deck or whatever. It is when I'm doing a reading for somebody, I don't want them cutting the cards. I do shuffling, I do all the handling of the cards during the actual reading, setting up for the reading, shuffling, dealing them out. Then if they want to touch them, they can. The reason I do that is I have found when I go out, especially when I'm doing things like psychic fairs and things like that, a lot of people are very nervous about having their cards read for whatever reason. I think some of them think you might be finding out something that they don't want you to know. I don't know what it is, but some people get very nervous. I am a believer in the energies, my energies. I do a lot of things to ground myself to make sure that my energies are very focused, and my area that I'm going to do the reading in is as prime as it can be, so I want my energies in the cards, handing the cards. So I don't want somebody who's very, very nervous or very, very worried or very, very anxious or very, very upset to put that energy into the cards that are being dealt for the reading. I want the reading to be, we're going to look at the facts, man, only the facts. We're going to look at the energies. I don't want your emotions in there. I don't want your fears or your anxieties in your reading. I want it to just be a picture of what the energies are saying. And I'm going to interpret those energies through the cards. So that's why I do that. The second thing that is probably maybe unique to me, maybe not completely unique to me, is I bind my decks to myself. What I mean by that is when I get a new deck, before I use the deck, I do a little ritual on the deck. And I have, it's just a simple ritual. I'm not going to go into that now. But as a part of the ritual, I use a black cord. I use a black cord. And here you can see I have a little black cord, my little black thread. And I will actually, as a part of the ritual, I will actually wrap my deck in the cord and say my words and pass through the elements and things like that. And then that deck sits on the altar for a few days, and that deck is then bound to me, and it is bound to me because I keep the cord with the deck. This one has a bag, so I keep the cord, I just put it in there and tied it inside the cover of the bag. So this deck, when I'm not using it, is in this bag. It resides in here, and with the cord, the binding cord intact, it just stays inside. Nobody even has to notice it. Okay, it's just there. It's just there. Some decks I keep in boxes, like I have a deck beside me. My hoi polloi deck is in here, and it's in a silk bag. to protect it, and it's also underneath that bag within this box is the cord I used to bound the deck to me. There's several reasons why I might do that. One reason is I have lost some decks, and that's when I really got the idea of, you lose the deck, and if you have it bound to you, you can retrieve it easier. You can do a spell and use a silver cord to pull that deck back to you. But also, it is like, I want to make sure that the deck represents the energies that I speak, represent the energies that I see from the deck. When I go out into public, again, if I'm out into public, there's a lot of people in that fair. I want the energies I want that deck to stay listening, pay attention to me. You're going to pay attention to me. You're not going to pay attention to all these people walking past. It's going to be me, and that's my way of protecting my deck from other people's energies. Now, if I'm in the house, I still do it because there's other energies around outside. My windows are usually always open. There's other people coming and going, other people in the house, other people in the neighborhood. It's just a little extra step that I take. It gives me pleasure. It gives me pleasure. I'm an empath, and a lot of these things mean a lot to me, a lot of these little extra steps. So those might be two things that are perhaps unique to me, perhaps not. Okay. My very last question is a piece of advice that I would offer, or a card you wish to embody, and why. Well, I don't wish to embody any card. I think I'm 70 years old, so I've been around that journey, that full around that those 22 cards many times in those 70 years. So I think at all times we continue on the journey, and there's cycles in our lives all the time. But piece of advice I would give, especially because we're doing this tag, and a lot of people are people just like me who like to put down cards and not really assign any. I hear a lot of people say, I don't really use spreads, I just put the cards down. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with taking your cards and taking 3 cards and putting 3 cards down and trying to say, how do these, well, those are not good, because those again were not shuffled. How do these 3 cards relate? How do they, and put them out and just say, how do they relate to each other? There's nothing wrong with that. And that's a really good way to do everyday readings, etc. But my caveat is this. My advice would be, if you are specifically seeking the answer to a question, if you are specifically seeking to know what the tarot has to say about a certain subject, or just the general area about, how can I become happier? How can I have a happier life? How can I improve my health? How can I improve my financial situation? Whatever, be sure to use a spread. Ask a particular question of each card in that spread. Because if you're just going to get 3 cards and you haven't asked anything, but you're secretly hoping to find out about love, right? You're going to put some wishful thinking into the cards. You're going to put some fear. Some of your fears are going to be put into the cards. Some of your, do you understand my point? So if you don't have positions, there's too much room for wishful thinking, too much room for reading into a situation, maybe something that's not there. If you're asking a specific question, or you have a specific question, assign meanings. Put out your cards and say, this card is going to tell me where my focus should be in my job hunt. This card is going to tell me what I should not pay attention to in my job hunt. This card is going to tell me what will help me in my job hunt. And then you pay attention to what that card is and make sure this card is always about what will help you in your job hunt. Okay? Don't leave it up to just randomness. That's my advice. I should have warned you at the beginning of the video. I'm a crone and I like to give advice, so that would be my advice. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for tagging me, Mary Grace, and thank you very much for Kelly Bear, for coming up with this really fun tag for everybody. And I hope I see some more people doing the tag. In the meantime, I am Rebecca, the good wife of the Crone House, and I wish you blessings.